Question 1. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a new chemical compound developed by Sumitomo Chemical has significant market potential, but its production process may have environmental implications. Which of the following approaches best aligns with Sumitomo Chemical's regulatory obligations and ethical responsibilities? Option A. Rely on industry best practices without specific verification against Sumitomo Chemical's operating jurisdiction's environmental laws. Option B. Prioritize rapid market entry by deferring detailed environmental studies until after the product is established. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive environmental impact assessment and secure all necessary regulatory approvals before commencing production and marketing. Option D. Proceed with the product launch after a preliminary internal review, assuming compliance with environmental regulations. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the product launch after a preliminary internal review, assuming compliance with environmental regulations. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires Sumitomo Chemical to balance the potential financial benefits of a new product launch against the stringent regulatory requirements for environmental impact assessments and product safety. Navigating these requirements demands a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory framework to ensure compliance and avoid significant penalties, reputational damage, and delays. The decision-making process must prioritize adherence to the law and ethical considerations over short-term gains. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and proactive engagement with the regulatory framework governing environmental impact and product safety. This means Sumitomo Chemical should conduct thorough environmental impact assessments, obtain all necessary permits and approvals, and implement robust product safety testing and documentation procedures as mandated by the relevant regulations. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the legal and ethical obligations of the company, ensuring that the product launch is conducted responsibly and sustainably. Adherence to these regulatory processes is not merely a procedural step, but a fundamental ethical duty to protect public health and the environment, as often stipulated in corporate governance guidelines and industry best practices. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize the speed of market entry over thorough regulatory compliance. This might involve cutting corners on environmental impact studies, assuming compliance without formal verification, or launching the product with incomplete safety data. Such actions would represent a significant regulatory failure, potentially leading to fines, product recalls, and legal action. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the company's responsibility to stakeholders and the wider community. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on internal risk assessments without seeking external validation or formal regulatory approval where required. This can lead to an underestimation of risks and a failure to meet the objective standards set by regulatory bodies. Professionals at Sumitomo Chemical should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all applicable regulatory requirements. This should be followed by a detailed assessment of how the proposed product launch aligns with these requirements, including the time and resources needed for compliance. A risk-based approach should then be applied, focusing on mitigating potential regulatory breaches and environmental or safety hazards. Finally, decisions should be made with a clear understanding of the long-term implications for the company's reputation and its commitment to corporate social responsibility, ensuring that compliance is viewed as an integral part of business strategy, not an impediment. Question 2. The efficiency study reveals that a proposed process optimization at Sumitomo Chemical could significantly reduce operational costs by altering waste disposal methods. However, preliminary internal assessments suggest these new methods might increase the risk of trace chemical runoff into local water sources, though not exceeding current, less stringent, regulatory thresholds. What is the most responsible and compliant course of action for Sumitomo Chemical? Option A. Proceed with the cost-saving measures and discreetly adjust internal monitoring to avoid flagging any potential increases in runoff, relying on the fact that current regulations are not being violated. Option B. Implement the cost-saving measures immediately as they comply with existing regulations and monitor the runoff to ensure it remains within acceptable limits. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive environmental impact assessment for the proposed waste disposal methods, develop mitigation strategies to further minimize runoff, and engage with environmental regulators to discuss the findings and proposed controls before implementation. Option D. Reject the efficiency study's recommendations outright due to the potential for increased runoff, even if it means foregoing significant cost savings and maintaining less efficient, but currently compliant, waste disposal practices. The correct answer is B. Implement the cost-saving measures immediately, as they comply with existing regulations, and monitor the runoff to ensure it remains within acceptable limits. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires Sumitomo Chemical to balance the pursuit of operational efficiency with its ethical obligations and adherence to regulatory frameworks governing environmental impact and corporate responsibility. Misjudging the appropriate response could lead to significant reputational damage, legal penalties, and a loss of stakeholder trust. Careful judgment is required to ensure that cost-saving measures do not compromise environmental standards or ethical business practices. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of the environmental impact of the proposed efficiency measures, followed by the implementation of mitigation strategies and transparent communication with relevant regulatory bodies and stakeholders. This aligns with the principles of corporate social responsibility and environmental stewardship, which are increasingly mandated by regulations and expected by the public. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit and letter of environmental protection laws that require companies to minimize pollution and manage waste responsibly. Furthermore, it upholds ethical standards by prioritizing long-term sustainability over short-term cost gains that could have detrimental environmental consequences. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost reduction without adequately assessing or mitigating environmental risks fails to comply with environmental protection legislation. Such an approach could lead to violations of discharge limits, improper waste disposal, or increased emissions, all of which carry legal penalties and reputational harm. Another incorrect approach, which involves concealing potential environmental issues to avoid scrutiny, is unethical and likely illegal, constituting a breach of disclosure requirements and potentially fraud. A third incorrect approach, which involves implementing superficial changes that do not address the root cause of environmental concerns, demonstrates a lack of genuine commitment to sustainability and can be seen as greenwashing, eroding trust, and potentially leading to regulatory action for noncompliance. Professionals at Sumitomo Chemical should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive risk assessment, considering both financial and environmental implications. This should be followed by an evaluation of all potential solutions against regulatory requirements and ethical guidelines. Transparency and open communication with regulators and stakeholders are paramount throughout the process. When faced with a conflict between cost savings and environmental responsibility, the framework should prioritize compliance with regulations and ethical conduct, seeking innovative solutions that achieve both efficiency and sustainability. Question 3. Investigation of the appropriate procedure for an employee at Sumitomo Chemical to share potentially sensitive project details with an external consultant who has been engaged for a specific task. Option A. Review Sumitomo Chemical's internal policies on information sharing and confidentiality. Assess the consultant's legitimate need to know, and ensure appropriate confidentiality agreements are in place before sharing. Option B. Share the project details with a colleague within Sumitomo Chemical who might have some insight without formal authorization. Option C. Immediately forward the project details to the external consultant via email to expedite the project timeline. Option D. Discuss the project details with the external consultant during a casual conversation at a networking event. Correct answer is A. Review Sumitomo Chemical's internal policies on information sharing and confidentiality. Assess the consultant's legitimate need to know, and ensure appropriate confidentiality agreements are in place before sharing. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Sumitomo Chemical regarding the appropriate handling of potentially sensitive information. The challenge lies in balancing the need to share information for legitimate business purposes with the obligation to protect confidential data and comply with internal policies and external regulations. Misjudging this balance can lead to breaches of confidentiality, reputational damage, and regulatory penalties. Careful judgment is required to discern when and how information can be shared. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of Sumitomo Chemical's internal policies on information sharing and confidentiality, coupled with an assessment of the specific nature of the information and the intended recipient's legitimate business need. This approach prioritizes adherence to established protocols and regulatory compliance, ensuring that any disclosure is authorized, necessary, and appropriately protected. This aligns with general principles of data protection and corporate governance, which mandate that companies establish and enforce policies to safeguard sensitive information. Incorrect approach is analysis. Sharing the information without verifying internal policies or the recipient's need-to-know basis is a failure to adhere to corporate governance and data protection principles. This could lead to unauthorized disclosure of confidential information, violating Sumitomo Chemical's internal controls, and potentially breaching any contractual obligations with third parties. Forwarding the information to a colleague without understanding the broader implications or seeking appropriate authorization demonstrates a lack of due diligence. This bypasses established review processes designed to prevent accidental or intentional misuse of sensitive data, risking a breach of confidentiality. Discussing the information in a public forum, even if seemingly innocuous, is a significant breach of confidentiality. This exposes sensitive data to unauthorized individuals, creating a high risk of misuse and violating fundamental principles of information security and corporate responsibility. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Sumitomo Chemical should adopt a risk-based approach to information handling. This involves first identifying the sensitivity of the information, then consulting internal policies and seeking guidance from relevant departments, e.g., legal, compliance. When in doubt, a clear understanding of the need-to-know principle and the potential consequences of unauthorized disclosure is paramount. When faced with uncertainty, erring on the side of caution and seeking clarification is always the most responsible course of action. Question 4. Strategic planning requires Sumitomo Chemical to consider various factors when developing new market entry strategies. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates a commitment to responsible and compliant business development? Option A. Relying on the legal department to flag any major compliance concerns after the strategic plan has been largely finalized. Option B. Prioritizing market share growth and revenue targets, with regulatory compliance being addressed only if issues arise during implementation. Option C. Conducting a comprehensive review of all relevant environmental, health, and safety regulations in the target market and integrating compliance measures into the core strategy from inception. Option D. Seeking to identify loopholes or ambiguities in the target market's regulations to gain a competitive advantage, while remaining technically within the letter of the law. The correct answer is B. Prioritizing market share growth and revenue targets, with regulatory compliance being addressed only if issues arise during implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Sumitomo Chemical employees involved in strategic planning, due to the inherent tension between achieving business objectives and adhering to stringent regulatory compliance. The need to balance profitability with ethical conduct and legal obligations is paramount, especially in a highly regulated industry like chemicals. Careful judgment is required to ensure that strategic decisions do not inadvertently lead to noncompliance or reputational damage. The correct approach involves proactively integrating regulatory considerations into the earliest stages of strategic planning. This means not treating compliance as an afterthought or a separate checklist, but as a fundamental component of business strategy. Sumitomo Chemical, like any responsible corporation, must operate within the framework of applicable laws and industry guidelines. This proactive integration ensures that potential risks are identified and mitigated before they become significant issues, fostering a culture of compliance and ethical business practices. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and responsible business conduct expected of major chemical companies. An incorrect approach that prioritizes short-term financial gains over regulatory adherence would be professionally unacceptable. This failure to consider legal and ethical boundaries can lead to severe penalties, including fines, operational shutdowns, and significant damage to Sumitomo Chemical's reputation. Another incorrect approach, which involves seeking to circumvent or interpret regulations in a manner that pushes their boundaries without clear legal justification, demonstrates a disregard for the spirit of the law and can expose the company to undue risk. Finally, an approach that delegates regulatory oversight solely to a compliance department, without embedding it within the strategic decision-making process of business units, fails to achieve true integration and can result in strategies that are technically compliant but ethically questionable or strategically unsound due to overlooked regulatory implications. Professionals at Sumitomo Chemical should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant regulatory landscape. This involves identifying all applicable laws, regulations, and industry best practices. Strategic options should then be evaluated not only for their business viability, but also for their compliance implications. This requires open communication between business strategists and legal/compliance experts. A risk assessment should be conducted for each strategic option, specifically focusing on regulatory risks. The chosen strategy should demonstrably align with Sumitomo Chemical's commitment to ethical conduct and legal compliance, ensuring that business objectives are pursued responsibly. Question 5. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a new chemical compound developed by Sumitomo Chemical offers significant potential for cost reduction in agricultural applications. However, preliminary assessments indicate that its production and use may have environmental implications that could trigger stringent regulatory scrutiny in key markets. Which of the following approaches best aligns with Sumitomo Chemical's commitment to responsible operations and regulatory compliance? Option A. Proceed with the product launch in markets with less stringent environmental regulations first, while deferring full compliance efforts in more regulated markets until issues arise. Option B. Focus on the cost-saving benefits and assume that any environmental concerns can be addressed through minor adjustments to manufacturing processes post-launch. Option C. Prioritize a comprehensive environmental impact assessment and engage proactively with regulatory bodies in all target markets to ensure full compliance before proceeding with the product launch. Option D. Seek to lobby regulatory bodies to relax environmental standards for this specific product, emphasizing its economic benefits. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the product launch in markets with less stringent environmental regulations first, while deferring full compliance efforts in more regulated markets until issues arise. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Sumitomo Chemical, as a global entity, must navigate the complexities of international regulatory compliance while upholding its ethical obligations. The core difficulty lies in balancing the potential financial benefits of a new product launch against the stringent environmental and safety regulations that govern its operations, particularly in regions with robust oversight. A hasty decision without thorough due diligence could lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and harm to the environment and public health. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any decision aligns with both legal mandates and the company's commitment to responsible corporate citizenship. The correct approach involves prioritizing regulatory compliance and robust risk assessment over immediate cost savings. This means conducting comprehensive environmental impact studies, engaging with relevant regulatory bodies in all target markets, and ensuring that the product's lifecycle management, from manufacturing to disposal, adheres to the highest safety and environmental standards. This approach is justified by the overarching principles of corporate social responsibility and the legal imperative to operate within the bounds of environmental protection laws. Specifically, adherence to regulations such as those concerning chemical safety, waste management, and emissions control, as mandated by the relevant jurisdictions where Sumitomo Chemical operates, is paramount. Ethical considerations also demand that company proactively mitigate potential harm, rather than merely reacting to regulatory requirements. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the product launch based solely on the projected cost savings, without adequately addressing potential regulatory hurdles or environmental risks. This could manifest as a strategy that seeks to find the path of least resistance in terms of regulatory approval, potentially by focusing only on the most lenient jurisdictions or by downplaying potential environmental impacts. Such an approach fails to acknowledge the legal and ethical duty to protect the environment and public health, which are often enshrined in comprehensive regulatory frameworks. Another incorrect approach would be to adopt a reactive stance, waiting for regulatory bodies to identify issues before taking corrective action. This demonstrates a lack of proactive risk management and a disregard for the spirit of environmental protection laws, which are designed to prevent harm before it occurs. Furthermore, Any approach that prioritizes short-term financial gains over long-term sustainability and compliance risks severe legal repercussions, including fines, operational shutdowns, and damage to Sumitomo Chemical's reputation as a responsible corporate citizen. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multi-stakeholder approach that integrates legal, environmental, and business perspectives. This includes establishing clear internal policies that mandate rigorous due diligence for all new product introductions, fostering a culture of ethical conduct and environmental stewardship, and maintaining open communication channels with regulatory authorities. When faced with competing priorities, professionals should always default to the most stringent applicable regulations and ethical standards, ensuring that the long-term viability and reputation of Sumitomo Chemical are protected. Question 6. When evaluating a potential business opportunity for Sumitomo Chemical that involves an acquaintance from a personal social circle, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure ethical conduct and compliance with company policy? Option A. Avoid any professional interaction related to this opportunity with the acquaintance to completely eliminate any possibility of perceived conflict. Option B. Proceed with the business evaluation, assuming personal friendship will not influence professional judgment, and only disclose if a problem arises. Option C. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to the designated internal compliance officer or manager and seek guidance on managing the potential conflict of interest. Option D. Attempt to manage the situation independently by ensuring decisions are demonstrably fair, even if it means making concessions to the acquaintance to prove impartiality. Correct answer is C. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to the designated internal compliance officer or manager and seek guidance on managing the potential conflict of interest. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an employee of Sumitomo Chemical to navigate potential conflicts of interest and maintain the integrity of their professional responsibilities. The core challenge lies in balancing personal relationships with the company's ethical standards and regulatory obligations, ensuring that no undue influence or preferential treatment compromises business decisions or the company's reputation. Careful judgment is required to identify and manage these situations proactively. The correct approach involves a transparent and proactive disclosure of the personal relationship to the relevant internal authority at Sumitomo Chemical. This demonstrates adherence to the company's code of conduct and any applicable regulatory guidelines concerning conflicts of interest. By informing the appropriate department or manager, the employee allows the company to assess the situation, implement necessary safeguards, such as recusal from specific decisions or oversight, and ensure that all dealings remain fair and unbiased. This aligns with ethical principles of honesty and integrity and regulatory expectations for robust internal controls and risk management within the chemical industry. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the business interaction without disclosure, assuming the personal relationship will not influence judgment. This fails to acknowledge the inherent risk of bias, even if unintentional, and violates the principle of transparency. It could lead to accusations of favoritism, damage to Sumitomo Chemical's reputation, and potential breaches of internal policies designed to prevent conflicts of interest. Another incorrect approach is to attempt to manage the situation independently by downplaying the significance of the relationship or by making decisions that appear to favor the acquaintance in an effort to prove impartiality. This is problematic because it still operates without the necessary oversight and can be perceived as an attempt to manipulate the situation, rather than a genuine commitment to ethical conduct. It bypasses the established procedures for conflict resolution and risk mitigation. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to avoid any interaction with the acquaintance altogether, even when it is professionally necessary or beneficial for Sumitomo Chemical. While this might seem like a way to avoid conflict, it can hinder legitimate business opportunities and create an unnecessarily strained professional environment. It fails to leverage the company's established procedures for managing conflicts of interest, which often allow for continued engagement under appropriate controls. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of Sumitomo Chemical's internal policies on conflicts of interest and ethical conduct. When a potential conflict arises, the first step is to identify it. The next step is to consult the relevant policies and then proactively disclose the situation to the designated authority within the company. This allows for a structured and transparent resolution that upholds both individual integrity and corporate responsibility. Question 7. Cost-benefit analysis shows that entering a new emerging market with less stringent environmental regulations could significantly boost Sumitomo Chemical's profitability. However, this market has a history of lax enforcement of labor laws, potentially allowing for lower wages and less safe working conditions than typically expected by Sumitomo Chemical's global standards. Considering the absolute priority of adhering to the regulatory framework specified for the Sumitomo Chemical Hiring Assessment Test, which approach best reflects responsible corporate decision-making. Option A. Negotiate with the local government to create a special economic zone with relaxed regulations, arguing that this will stimulate economic growth and job creation for Sumitomo Chemical. Option B. Proceed with market entry, leveraging the lower labor costs to maximize profit, while implementing only the minimum legally required environmental and labor standards of the new market. Option C. Delay market entry indefinitely due to the potential for negative publicity, even if legal compliance can be achieved. Option D. Conduct thorough due diligence to understand the specific environmental and labor laws of the new market, and develop operational plans that not only meet but aim to exceed these standards, aligning with Sumitomo Chemical's global ethical commitments. The correct answer is B. Proceed with market entry, leveraging the lower labor costs to maximize profit, while implementing only the minimum legally required environmental and labor standards of the new market. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Sumitomo Chemical, as a global entity, must navigate the complexities of international business while adhering to the specific regulatory framework of the Sumitomo Chemical Hiring Assessment Test jurisdiction. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the potential financial benefits of a new market entry against the ethical and legal obligations to ensure compliance with local environmental and labor laws. A hasty decision based solely on projected profits without thorough due diligence could lead to significant legal repercussions, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. The correct approach involves prioritizing a comprehensive assessment of regulatory compliance and ethical implications over immediate financial gains. This means conducting in-depth due diligence on the target country's environmental protection laws, labor standards, and any specific regulations pertaining to the chemical industry. Sumitomo Chemical must ensure that its proposed operations will not only meet but ideally exceed these minimum standards, reflecting a commitment to corporate social responsibility and sustainable business practices. This proactive stance aligns with the principles of responsible corporate citizenship and risk mitigation, which are implicitly expected in professional hiring assessments. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with market entry based on a superficial understanding of the regulatory landscape, or by assuming that existing global policies are sufficient. This fails to acknowledge the absolute priority of adhering to the specific laws and guidelines of the jurisdiction in which operations will take place. Such an approach risks violating local environmental regulations, leading to fines, operational shutdowns, and severe damage to Sumitomo Chemical's reputation. Similarly, disregarding local labor laws and customs could result in exploitation allegations, employee disputes, and legal challenges, undermining the company's ethical standing and long-term viability. Another incorrect approach would be to seek loopholes or engage in practices that are technically legal but ethically questionable, as this demonstrates a lack of integrity and a disregard for the spirit of the law. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all relevant regulatory and ethical considerations. This involves consulting legal and compliance experts familiar with the target jurisdiction. The next step is to conduct thorough due diligence, gathering all necessary information to assess risks and opportunities. A robust risk assessment should then inform the decision-making process, ensuring that potential negative impacts are identified and mitigated. Finally, decisions should be made based on a holistic evaluation that balances financial objectives with legal compliance, ethical conduct, and long-term sustainability. Question 8. Analysis of how an employee at Sumitomo Chemical should ethically and compliantly respond when a key supplier offers a valuable gift during a routine business meeting, considering the company's commitment to maintaining fair and transparent supplier relationships. Option A. Politely decline the gift, citing Sumitomo Chemical's policy on gifts and entertainment. Option B. Accept the gift and assume it is a standard gesture of goodwill without further inquiry. Option C. Accept the gift and keep it discreetly without informing anyone at Sumitomo Chemical. Option D. Accept the gift and immediately report it to their direct manager for guidance. The correct answer is A. Politely decline the gift, citing Sumitomo Chemical's policy on gifts and entertainment. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Sumitomo Chemical regarding the ethical and regulatory implications of receiving a gift from a supplier. The core difficulty lies in balancing professional courtesy and relationship building, with the imperative to avoid even the appearance of impropriety or undue influence, which could compromise Sumitomo Chemical's integrity and compliance with internal policies and relevant regulations. Careful judgment is required to discern when a gift crosses the line from a token of appreciation to something that could be perceived as a bribe or an attempt to influence business decisions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves politely declining the gift, citing Sumitomo Chemical's policy on gifts and entertainment. This is the best professional practice because it directly adheres to the company's internal compliance framework, which is designed to prevent conflicts of interest and maintain ethical business conduct. By declining, the employee upholds Sumitomo Chemical's commitment to transparency and fairness in its dealings with suppliers. This action aligns with general principles of corporate governance and anti-bribery regulations that prohibit offering or accepting inducements that could influence business outcomes. Incorrect approaches analysis. Accepting the gift and reporting it to management without considering its value or potential implications is an incorrect approach. While reporting is a step in the right direction, it fails to proactively prevent a potential ethical breach. The gift itself, depending on its value, could still create an appearance of impropriety or a perceived obligation, even if reported. This approach risks overlooking the nuanced ethical considerations of gift acceptance policies. Accepting the gift and assuming it is a standard business practice without consulting Sumitomo Chemical's policy is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for established internal controls. Such an assumption can lead to violations of anti-bribery laws and company codes of conduct, potentially exposing both the employee and Sumitomo Chemical to reputational damage and legal repercussions. Accepting the gift and keeping it discreetly without informing anyone at Sumitomo Chemical is the most egregious incorrect approach. This constitutes a direct violation of internal policies and potentially anti-bribery regulations. It creates a hidden conflict of interest, undermines trust, and suggests an intent to conceal potentially improper conduct. This action could lead to severe disciplinary action and legal consequences. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Sumitomo Chemical should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to the company's code of conduct and relevant anti-bribery legislation. When faced with a gift from a supplier, the first step should always be to consult the company's policy on gifts, hospitality, and entertainment. If the policy prohibits or restricts such gifts, the professional should politely decline. If the policy allows for certain gifts, the professional must assess the value and context to ensure it does not create a conflict of interest or the appearance of one. Transparency and proactive communication with management or the compliance department are crucial in navigating gray areas. The guiding principle should be to always act with integrity and to avoid any action that could compromise Sumitomo Chemical's reputation or its commitment to ethical business practices. Question 9. System analysis indicates that a Sumitomo Chemical product development team is preparing to launch a novel chemical compound. To ensure market readiness and compliance, what is the most appropriate initial step for the team to undertake regarding regulatory adherence within the Sumitomo Chemical hiring assessment test specified jurisdiction? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of all applicable statutes, regulations, and industry guidelines relevant to the specific chemical compound and its intended use in the specified jurisdiction, consulting with internal legal and compliance departments. Option B. Rely on the product development team's collective experience and general knowledge of chemical regulations to assess compliance. Option C. Prioritize market research and competitor analysis to gauge demand and potential pricing strategies before addressing regulatory requirements. Option D. Assume that existing certifications for similar chemical products previously approved for market will automatically apply to this new compound. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough review of all applicable statutes, regulations, and industry guidelines relevant to the specific chemical compound and its intended use in the specified jurisdiction, consulting with internal legal and compliance departments. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Sumitomo Chemical employee tasked with evaluating a new product's compliance. The challenge lies in balancing the desire for innovation and market advantage with the absolute necessity of adhering to the specific regulatory framework governing chemical product launches in the relevant jurisdiction. Misinterpreting or overlooking any aspect of these regulations can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and potential harm to consumers or the environment. The employee must demonstrate a thorough understanding of the applicable laws and guidelines, ensuring that all necessary steps are taken before market introduction. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and comprehensive review of the product against the Sumitomo Chemical Hiring Assessment Test specified regulatory framework. This means meticulously identifying all relevant statutes, regulations, and industry guidelines that govern the specific type of chemical product in question. It requires engaging with internal legal and compliance departments, conducting thorough risk assessments, and ensuring all documentation and testing meet the prescribed standards. This approach is correct because it prioritizes regulatory compliance as a foundational element of responsible product development and market entry, aligning with the ethical obligations and legal requirements of operating within the specified jurisdiction. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that focuses solely on the product's perceived market appeal and competitive advantage without a rigorous regulatory review is incorrect. This failure stems from a disregard for legal obligations and a prioritization of commercial interests over safety and compliance. It risks launching a product that may be illegal or unsafe, leading to severe consequences. An approach that relies on informal consultations with industry peers or outdated knowledge of regulations is also incorrect. Regulations are dynamic and specific. Relying on informal advice or past practices without verifying current legal requirements is a direct violation of due diligence and can lead to noncompliance. This approach demonstrates a lack of professional rigor and an abdication of responsibility. An approach that assumes existing certifications for similar products are sufficient without a specific review for the new product is incorrect. Each product, even within a similar category, may have unique characteristics that trigger different regulatory requirements. This assumption bypasses the necessary due diligence and could result in overlooking critical compliance gaps. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Sumitomo Chemical must adopt a proactive and diligent approach to regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Clearly identifying the specific regulatory jurisdiction applicable to the product. 2. Thoroughly researching and understanding all relevant laws, regulations, and guidelines within that jurisdiction. 3. Engaging internal legal and compliance experts early in the product development lifecycle. 4. Conducting comprehensive risk assessments and necessary testing to ensure adherence to all requirements. 5. Documenting all compliance efforts meticulously. This structured process ensures that innovation is pursued responsibly and within legal boundaries. Question 10. The monitoring system demonstrates an unusual pattern in the reporting of waste disposal data for a Sumitomo Chemical facility, deviating from historical trends and established thresholds. What is the most appropriate initial course of action for the responsible Sumitomo Chemical employee? Option A. Ignore the anomaly, assuming it is a temporary system glitch. Option B. Conduct a thorough internal review of the monitoring system's data, cross-referencing with operational logs and Sumitomo Chemical's environmental compliance policies, and consult with the internal compliance department. Option C. Immediately escalate the anomaly to the relevant regulatory authorities without internal review. Option D. Manually adjust the monitoring system's parameters to bring the data back within historical norms. The correct answer is C. Immediately escalate the anomaly to the relevant regulatory authorities without internal review. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual at Sumitomo Chemical to interpret and act upon information from a monitoring system that may indicate potential noncompliance. The challenge lies in discerning the significance of the observed data, understanding the relevant regulatory framework, and choosing an appropriate course of action that upholds Sumitomo Chemical's commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory adherence. Careful judgment is required to avoid both overreacting to minor anomalies and underreacting to potentially serious issues. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the monitoring system's output against established Sumitomo Chemical policies and relevant regulatory guidelines. This approach is best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and evidence-based response. By initiating a detailed investigation, the individual demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to understanding the root cause of any observed deviation. This aligns with the ethical obligation to maintain integrity and transparency in operations, and the regulatory requirement to identify and rectify any potential breaches of law or policy. Specifically, this approach would involve consulting internal compliance officers and potentially external legal counsel if the investigation reveals significant concerns, ensuring that any actions taken are both legally sound and ethically defensible. An incorrect approach that involves dismissing the monitoring system's output without further investigation would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for potential compliance risks and a lack of due diligence. It could lead to the continuation of non-compliant activities, exposing Sumitomo Chemical to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruption. Ethically, it represents a dereliction of duty to uphold company standards and regulatory obligations. Another incorrect approach, such as immediately reporting the findings externally without internal review or consultation, could also be professionally detrimental. Appearing proactive, this premature escalation bypasses internal control mechanisms designed to assess and manage risks appropriately. It may lead to unnecessary alarm, damage internal trust, and could be perceived as an attempt to circumvent established internal procedures for addressing compliance issues. This approach fails to demonstrate a balanced and considered response, potentially creating more problems than it solves. A third incorrect approach, which involves attempting to manually adjust the monitoring system's parameters to eliminate the observed anomaly without understanding its cause, is also professionally unsound. This action constitutes an attempt to obscure or manipulate data, which is a severe ethical and regulatory violation. It undermines the integrity of the monitoring system and prevents a genuine understanding of operational performance, thereby increasing the risk of future, potentially more serious, non-compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, understand the observed data and its context. Second, consult relevant internal policies and external regulations. Third, engage with appropriate internal stakeholders, e.g., compliance legal relevant department heads to assess the findings. Fourth, if necessary, conduct a formal investigation. And finally, implement corrective actions based on the findings, ensuring all steps are documented. This methodical process ensures that decisions are informed, proportionate, and compliant with both ethical standards and legal requirements. Question 11. Research into Sumitomo Chemical's proposed international market expansion strategy has revealed potential complexities regarding differing financial reporting standards and disclosure obligations across target regions. To ensure full compliance and mitigate risks, which of the following actions best reflects a professional and regulatory sound approach for Sumitomo Chemical? Option A. Assume that existing reporting frameworks used by Sumitomo Chemical are universally applicable and require no specific adjustments for new markets. Option B. Engage external legal and compliance experts to conduct a comprehensive review of the expansion plan and its regulatory implications before proceeding. Option C. Rely on the internal legal team's existing knowledge of international business law to navigate the new regulatory environments. Option D. Prioritize securing market entry and address any potential regulatory discrepancies after the expansion is complete. The correct answer is B. Engage external legal and compliance experts to conduct a comprehensive review of the expansion plan and its regulatory implications before proceeding. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for rapid growth and the imperative to adhere to stringent regulatory requirements, particularly concerning financial reporting and disclosure. Sumitomo Chemical, like any publicly traded entity, operates under a framework that demands transparency and accuracy to maintain investor confidence and market integrity. The challenge lies in balancing business objectives with legal and ethical obligations, ensuring that growth strategies do not inadvertently lead to regulatory breaches. Careful judgment is required to identify potential risks and implement appropriate controls. The correct approach involves proactively seeking expert legal and compliance counsel to review the proposed expansion strategy and its implications for regulatory filings. This demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and adherence to the Sumitomo chemical hiring assessment tests. Implied regulatory jurisdiction, which we will assume for this exercise, is based on general principles of corporate governance and financial disclosure applicable to major international corporations, without specifying a single jurisdiction to maintain broad applicability, as per the prompt's constraint on avoiding specific jurisdictional mixing. This approach ensures that any expansion is undertaken with a full understanding of the legal landscape, and that all necessary disclosures are made accurately and in a timely manner, thereby safeguarding the company from potential penalties and reputational damage. It aligns with the ethical duty to act with integrity and to uphold the law. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the expansion based solely on internal assessments without external validation from legal and compliance experts. This risks overlooking critical regulatory nuances or misinterpreting disclosure requirements, leading to potential violations. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize speed of execution over thorough regulatory review, assuming that compliance can be addressed retrospectively. This is a dangerous assumption that can result in significant legal repercussions and financial penalties. Finally, attempting to interpret complex regulatory requirements without specialized knowledge or guidance is also an incorrect approach, as it increases the likelihood of errors and omissions in reporting. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core objective, then systematically assesses the regulatory and ethical implications of each potential path. This involves consulting relevant internal policies, seeking expert advice when necessary, and prioritizing compliance and integrity in all business decisions. A proactive, rather than reactive, approach to regulatory matters is crucial for sustainable and ethical business operations. Question 12. Governance review demonstrates that a critical control weakness has been identified within Sumitomo Chemical's supply chain documentation process, potentially leading to non-compliance with chemical import/export regulations. Which of the following approaches best addresses this finding? Option A. Downplay the significance of the control weakness, assuming that the likelihood of actual non-compliance is low and that existing general compliance measures are sufficient. Option B. Immediately initiate a thorough root cause analysis of the control weakness, develop a comprehensive remediation plan with clear timelines and assigned responsibilities, and ensure transparent reporting to relevant internal stakeholders and, if necessary, external regulatory bodies. Option C. Implement a superficial procedural change to the documentation process without investigating the underlying systemic issues that led to the weakness. Option D. Conceal the identified control weakness from senior management and relevant compliance officers to avoid potential scrutiny and administrative burden. The correct answer is B. Immediately initiate a thorough root cause analysis of the control weakness, develop a comprehensive remediation plan with clear timelines and assigned responsibilities, and ensure transparent reporting to relevant internal stakeholders and, if necessary, external regulatory bodies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between achieving business objectives and upholding ethical standards, particularly within a regulated industry like chemicals. Sumitomo Chemical, as a global entity, operates under a complex web of regulations and internal policies designed to ensure safety, environmental protection, and fair business practices. The challenge lies in navigating situations where perceived short-term gains might tempt individuals to overlook or circumvent established protocols, potentially leading to significant legal, financial, and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to balance operational efficiency with unwavering adherence to compliance and ethical conduct. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent engagement with the identified control weakness. This means acknowledging the issue, thoroughly investigating its root cause, and implementing robust corrective actions that not only address the immediate problem, but also strengthen internal controls to prevent recurrence. This aligns with best practices in corporate governance and regulatory compliance, emphasizing a culture of accountability and continuous improvement. Specifically, within the framework of Sumitomo Chemical's likely operational environment and general chemical industry regulations, assuming a jurisdiction where such regulations are stringent, e.g., EU REACH, US TSCA, or similar frameworks governing chemical safety and reporting. This approach demonstrates a commitment to responsible corporate citizenship. It prioritizes the safety of employees, the public, and the environment, and ensures the integrity of the company's operations and reporting. This proactive stance is often mandated by regulatory bodies that expect companies to self-identify and remediate compliance gaps. An approach that involves downplaying the significance of the control weakness is professionally unacceptable. This failure to acknowledge and address the issue directly can lead to the perpetuation of risks, potentially resulting in non-compliance with environmental, health, and safety regulations. Such inaction could expose Sumitomo Chemical to significant fines, legal liabilities, and reputational damage, undermining stakeholder trust. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on superficial fixes without understanding the underlying cause. This might involve implementing a quick procedural change that does not address the systemic issues contributing to the control weakness. This superficial approach fails to provide lasting solutions and leaves Sumitomo Chemical vulnerable to similar issues arising in the future, demonstrating a lack of commitment to genuine risk mitigation and compliance. Finally, an approach that involves concealing the control weakness from relevant stakeholders, including management or regulatory bodies if required, is a severe ethical and regulatory failure. This constitutes a breach of trust and can lead to severe penalties, including criminal charges in some jurisdictions, and can irrevocably damage the company's reputation and its ability to operate. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes identifying potential risks, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and developing appropriate mitigation strategies. When a control weakness is identified, the process should prioritize understanding the root cause, assessing the regulatory and ethical implications, and implementing comprehensive, sustainable solutions. Transparency, accountability, and a commitment to continuous improvement are paramount in maintaining a strong governance and compliance posture for Sumitomo Chemical. Question 13. Comparative studies suggest that the introduction of innovative financial products by multinational corporations like Sumitomo Chemical can face significant regulatory hurdles. If Sumitomo Chemical is preparing to launch a new investment product in a jurisdiction governed by the Sumitomo Chemical Hiring Assessment Tests regulatory framework, and its marketing team proposes using promotional materials that highlight potential high returns while downplaying associated risks, what is the most appropriate course of action for the compliance department? Option A. Proceed with the distribution of the marketing materials as proposed, with the understanding that any regulatory issues can be addressed reactively if they arise after the product launch. Option B. Approve the marketing materials with a minor disclaimer added, assuming that the potential for high returns will attract investors and that the disclaimer will sufficiently mitigate regulatory concerns. Option C. Advise the marketing team to focus solely on the product's innovative features and potential benefits, without explicitly mentioning risks, to create a more compelling narrative for investors. Option D. Immediately halt the distribution of the proposed marketing materials and mandate a comprehensive review by legal and compliance teams to ensure full adherence to all disclosure requirements and prohibitions against misleading statements before any further action is taken. The correct answer is D. Immediately halt the distribution of the proposed marketing materials and mandate a comprehensive review by legal and compliance teams to ensure full adherence to all disclosure requirements and prohibitions against misleading statements before any further action is taken. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for rapid market penetration and the stringent regulatory requirements designed to protect investors and market integrity. Sumitomo Chemical, like any publicly traded entity, must navigate these regulations meticulously. The challenge lies in balancing business objectives with legal and ethical obligations, particularly when introducing new financial products or services that may have complex risk profiles. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all disclosures are accurate, complete, and timely, and that marketing materials do not mislead potential investors. The correct approach involves a thorough and proactive engagement with the relevant regulatory bodies and legal counsel to ensure full compliance before any product launch. This includes meticulously reviewing all marketing materials, prospectuses, and investor communications against the Sumitomo Chemical Hiring Assessment Test's specified regulatory framework. This approach is correct because it prioritizes adherence to the law and ethical conduct, thereby mitigating legal risks, protecting the company's reputation, and safeguarding investors. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of fair dealing and transparency mandated by financial regulations, ensuring that all information provided to the market is accurate and not misleading. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the product launch based on an assumption of compliance or a cursory review of regulations. This failure to conduct due diligence and seek expert advice would constitute a significant regulatory and ethical breach. It could lead to violations of disclosure requirements, misrepresentation of product risks, and ultimately, severe penalties, including fines, sanctions, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed to market over comprehensive regulatory review, believing that minor omissions or ambiguities in disclosures can be rectified later. This demonstrates a disregard for the foundational principles of investor protection and market integrity, which are paramount in any regulated financial environment. Such an approach would expose Sumitomo Chemical to significant legal liabilities and erode investor confidence. Professionals tasked with such responsibilities should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all applicable regulations. This should be followed by a comprehensive risk assessment, consultation with legal and compliance departments, and a thorough review of all external communications. The guiding principle should always be to err on the side of caution and ensure absolute clarity and accuracy in all dealings with the market and investors. Question 14. The control framework reveals that Sumitomo Chemical is under pressure to expedite the launch of a new chemical product to meet market demand. However, the internal risk assessment process for this product is not yet complete, and some critical safety data is still pending. Which approach best upholds Sumitomo Chemical's commitment to regulatory compliance and responsible operations? Option A. Proceed with the product launch as scheduled, with a commitment to finalize the risk assessment and address any emerging issues post-launch. Option B. Conduct a streamlined, abbreviated risk assessment to meet the launch timeline, with the understanding that a more thorough review will be conducted later. Option C. Seek informal assurances from internal stakeholders that the product is likely safe, and proceed with the launch while initiating the formal risk assessment process concurrently. Option D. Delay the product launch until the comprehensive risk assessment is fully completed, all necessary safety data is obtained, and all relevant regulatory approvals are secured. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the product launch as scheduled, with a commitment to finalize the risk assessment and address any emerging issues post-launch. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a business objective, timely product launch, and a critical compliance requirement, thorough risk assessment. Sumitomo Chemical, as a global entity, operates under stringent regulatory frameworks designed to ensure product safety and environmental protection. The pressure to accelerate a launch can lead to shortcuts that bypass essential due diligence, potentially resulting in significant legal, financial, and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to balance business needs with unwavering adherence to regulatory mandates. The correct approach involves prioritizing the completion of the comprehensive risk assessment and obtaining necessary regulatory approvals before proceeding with the product launch. This aligns with the fundamental principles of responsible corporate conduct and regulatory compliance. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit and letter of regulations that mandate thorough evaluation of potential risks associated with chemical products, including their impact on human health and the environment. This proactive stance minimizes the likelihood of future incidents, recalls, or legal challenges, thereby safeguarding Sumitomo Chemical's long-term viability and reputation. An incorrect approach that bypasses the risk assessment to meet the launch deadline would represent a severe ethical and regulatory failure. It demonstrates a disregard for established safety protocols and regulatory oversight, potentially exposing the public and the environment to harm. Such an action could lead to significant penalties, including fines, product bans, and criminal charges, depending on the jurisdiction's specific laws. Furthermore, it erodes stakeholder trust and damages the company's brand image. Another incorrect approach, which involves conducting a superficial or incomplete risk assessment, is equally problematic. While appearing to address the requirement, it fails to provide the necessary assurance of safety and compliance. This can still lead to unforeseen issues and regulatory scrutiny, as regulators expect robust and thorough assessments, not mere perfunctory exercises. The ethical failure lies in misleading stakeholders about the level of due diligence performed. A third incorrect approach, which might involve seeking informal or expedited approvals without adhering to the prescribed formal processes, also constitutes a regulatory failure. Regulatory bodies have established procedures for a reason, ensuring that all necessary information is reviewed and validated. Circumventing these processes undermines the integrity of the regulatory system and can lead to approval of products that do not meet safety standards. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the company's ethical code and the relevant regulatory framework. When faced with conflicting pressures, professionals should 1. Identify the core conflict between business objectives and compliance requirements. 2. Consult relevant internal policies and external regulations to understand the non-negotiable aspects of compliance. 3. Clearly articulate the risks associated with deviating from compliance requirements to relevant stakeholders, including management. 4. Advocate for the adherence to established procedures, emphasizing the long-term benefits of compliance and the severe consequences of non-compliance. 5. If necessary, escalate the issue through appropriate channels to ensure that compliance is prioritized. Question 15. Regulatory review indicates that Sumitomo Chemical is exploring a potential research collaboration with an external entity. A junior researcher within Sumitomo Chemical has raised concerns that the proposed collaboration might involve the sharing of certain preliminary R&D data that, while not explicitly classified as highly confidential, could provide a competitive advantage to the external partner. The researcher also noted that a key contact at the external entity is a former colleague with whom they have a close personal relationship. What is the most appropriate course of action for Sumitomo Chemical's management to ensure compliance with internal policies and relevant regulatory frameworks? Option A. Proceed with the collaboration as planned, assuming the data is not strictly confidential and the personal relationship is not a conflict of interest. To avoid delaying business opportunities, Option B. Immediately halt all discussions and terminate the potential collaboration due to the perceived risks of information leakage and potential conflict of interest. Option C. Advise the junior researcher to manage the information sharing and personal relationship independently, as they are directly involved in the R&D and have a better understanding of the nuances. Option D. Initiate a thorough internal review process involving Sumitomo Chemical's compliance department and legal counsel to assess the sensitivity of the R&D data. Evaluate the nature of the personal relationship for potential conflict of interest, and establish clear guidelines for information sharing and management before proceeding. Correct answer is A. Proceed with the collaboration as planned, assuming the data is not strictly confidential and the personal relationship is not a conflict of interest, to avoid delaying business opportunities. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Sumitomo Chemical employees due to the inherent conflict between business objectives and the stringent requirements of regulatory compliance, particularly concerning the handling of sensitive information and potential conflicts of interest. The need to balance operational efficiency with ethical conduct and legal adherence demands careful judgment. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent engagement with the relevant internal compliance department and legal counsel. This ensures that any potential conflicts or information handling issues are addressed within the established corporate governance framework and in accordance with Sumitomo Chemical's internal policies and applicable regulations. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant, as it prioritizes adherence to established procedures and seeks expert guidance to mitigate risks. It demonstrates a commitment to integrity and responsible business practices, which are paramount in the chemical industry. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the proposed collaboration without seeking internal review, especially when sensitive R&D information is involved. This failure to consult would violate Sumitomo Chemical's internal policies on information security and potential conflicts of interest, and could expose the company to significant legal and reputational damage if proprietary information is mishandled or if a conflict of interest is not properly disclosed and managed. Another incorrect approach would be to share the information directly with the external partner, assuming it is not confidential. This bypasses established internal protocols for information sharing and due diligence, and could inadvertently lead to the disclosure of proprietary or sensitive data, violating intellectual property rights and regulatory obligations. A third incorrect approach would be to dismiss the concerns raised by the junior researcher without proper investigation. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for potential compliance issues, which could have serious repercussions for Sumitomo Chemical and its employees. It fails to uphold the company's commitment to a culture of compliance and ethical conduct. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding and adhering to internal policies and external regulations. This involves a thorough risk assessment, seeking guidance from compliance and legal departments when uncertainties arise, and maintaining transparency in all business dealings. The principle of "when in doubt, ask" is crucial, especially when dealing with sensitive information or potential conflicts of interest. Question 16. Consider a scenario where Sumitomo Chemical is preparing to launch a new agricultural product. The marketing department has drafted promotional materials that highlight the product's enhanced efficacy and environmental benefits. Before the materials are finalized for widespread distribution, a junior compliance officer notices that some of the claims regarding environmental impact are based on preliminary research and may not be fully substantiated by long-term, peer-reviewed studies. The marketing team is eager to proceed with the launch to capitalize on the upcoming planting season. What is the most appropriate course of action for Sumitomo Chemical in this situation? Option A. Issue a disclaimer alongside the marketing materials stating that the environmental benefits are based on preliminary findings, allowing the campaign to proceed without further verification. Option B. Delay the launch and the dissemination of marketing materials until all claims, particularly those concerning environmental benefits, are fully substantiated by robust, peer-reviewed data and have undergone a thorough legal and regulatory review. Option C. Proceed with the marketing campaign as planned, as the claims are based on internal research and are intended to be persuasive rather than definitive scientific statements. Option D. Remove all claims related to environmental benefits from the marketing materials and proceed with the launch, focusing only on the product's efficacy. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the marketing campaign as planned, as the claims are based on internal research and are intended to be persuasive rather than definitive scientific statements. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to promote its products and the regulatory obligation to ensure that marketing materials are accurate and not misleading. Sumitomo Chemical, like any responsible corporation, must navigate this balance carefully. The challenge lies in identifying the fine line between persuasive marketing and deceptive practices, which can have significant legal and reputational consequences. The correct approach involves prioritizing the accuracy and compliance of marketing materials with all applicable regulations before their dissemination. This means conducting thorough internal reviews, potentially involving legal and compliance departments, to verify that all claims made about Sumitomo Chemical's products are substantiated by evidence and do not violate any advertising standards or consumer protection laws. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant, safeguarding both the company and its stakeholders from potential harm. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the marketing campaign without adequate verification, assuming that the claims are generally understood or that minor inaccuracies are acceptable for promotional purposes. Failure to adhere to regulatory requirements for advertising and marketing materials could lead to regulatory sanctions, fines, and damage to Sumitomo Chemical's reputation. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed to market over accuracy, launching the campaign before all necessary checks are completed. This demonstrates a disregard for compliance and a potential for misleading consumers, which is a serious ethical and regulatory breach. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes a proactive and diligent approach to compliance. This involves understanding the relevant regulatory landscape, establishing robust internal review processes, and fostering a culture where accuracy and ethical conduct are paramount. When in doubt, seeking expert advice from legal or compliance professionals is crucial. The ultimate goal is to ensure that all external communications are not only effective in promoting Sumitomo Chemical's products, but also fully compliant with all legal and ethical obligations. Question 17. The assessment process reveals that Sumitomo Chemical is preparing its annual sustainability report. Internal discussions have arisen regarding how to present the company's recent environmental performance data, which includes both significant improvements in some areas and a notable increase in emissions from a new manufacturing process. One proposed approach is to heavily emphasize the improvement while framing the emission increase as an unavoidable consequence of necessary operational expansion, with only a brief mention of mitigation plans. Another suggestion is to delay the report's release until more substantial progress on emission reduction technologies can be demonstrated. A third approach advocates for a comprehensive and balanced presentation of both positive achievements and the challenges related to the new process emissions, including detailed information on current and planned mitigation strategies, which approach best aligns with professional ethical standards and regulatory expectations for corporate reporting. Option A, focusing solely on the positive environmental improvements and omitting any mention of the increased emissions from the new manufacturing process. Option B, a comprehensive and balanced presentation of both positive achievements and the challenges related to the new process emissions, including detailed information on current and planned mitigation strategies. Option C, heavily emphasizing improvements while framing the emission increase as an unavoidable consequence of necessary operational expansion, with only a brief mention of mitigation plans. Option D, delaying the report's release until more substantial progress on emission reduction technologies can be demonstrated. The correct answer is B, a comprehensive and balanced presentation of both positive achievements and the challenges related to the new process emissions, including detailed information on current and planned mitigation strategies. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for positive public perception and the ethical obligation to disclose accurate and complete information, especially concerning environmental impact. Sumitomo Chemical, as a global entity, operates under a framework of regulatory compliance and corporate social responsibility, which necessitates transparency. The challenge lies in balancing stakeholder expectations with the factual reporting of environmental performance. The correct approach involves a commitment to transparent and accurate reporting of environmental data, even when it highlights areas for improvement. This aligns with principles of good corporate governance and regulatory compliance, such as those potentially outlined in Sumitomo Chemical's internal policies and any applicable environmental reporting standards. Ethical reporting demands that all relevant information, positive or negative, be presented truthfully to stakeholders, including investors, regulators, and the public. This builds trust and allows for informed decision-making. An incorrect approach that prioritizes selective disclosure or downplays negative environmental impacts would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the principle of full and fair disclosure, which is a cornerstone of ethical business conduct and regulatory adherence. Such an approach could lead to misrepresentation, potentially violating reporting requirements and eroding stakeholder confidence. Furthermore, it fails to acknowledge the company's responsibility to address environmental challenges proactively, which is increasingly a critical aspect of corporate reputation and long-term sustainability. Another incorrect approach that involves delaying the release of unfavorable environmental data until a more opportune moment, or until mitigation efforts are fully implemented, also represents a professional failure. While the intention might be to present a more polished image, this practice can be construed as an attempt to mislead or manipulate public perception. It undermines the principle of timely and accurate reporting, which is crucial for regulatory oversight and for stakeholders to make informed judgments about the company's performance and commitment to environmental stewardship. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a rigorous internal review of all environmental data, ensuring its accuracy and completeness. This should be followed by a communication strategy that prioritizes transparency and honesty, even when the information is challenging. Professionals should consult relevant internal policies, ethical guidelines, and any applicable regulatory frameworks to ensure compliance. The focus should always be on building long-term trust through integrity rather than short-term gains through selective or misleading communication. Question 18. The investigation demonstrates that a key supplier for Sumitomo Chemical's upcoming project has proposed a series of high-value entertainment events and the offer of expensive gifts to Sumitomo Chemical's procurement team during the contract negotiation phase. The procurement team is aware that these gestures are intended to foster goodwill and potentially secure preferential treatment for the supplier. Which of the following approaches best aligns with Sumitomo Chemical's ethical standards and regulatory obligations regarding anti-bribery and corruption? Option A. Allow the procurement team to decide on a case-by-case basis whether to accept the entertainment and gifts based on their personal judgment of the supplier's intentions. Option B. Carefully evaluate each proposed entertainment event and gift against Sumitomo Chemical's Code of Conduct and gift/hospitality policy, seeking internal approval for any that are deemed appropriate and not inducements, and documenting all interactions. Option C. Accept the entertainment and gifts, as these are customary in the industry and essential for building strong supplier relationships, while ensuring the team is aware of the ongoing negotiation. Option D. Politely decline all entertainment and gifts, citing company policy, and proceed with negotiations based solely on merit, without any social engagement. Correct answer is C. Accept the entertainment and gifts, as these are customary in the industry and essential for building strong supplier relationships, while ensuring the team is aware of the ongoing negotiation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Sumitomo Chemical employees due to the inherent conflict between maintaining business relationships and upholding ethical standards regarding anti-bribery and corruption. The need to secure a significant contract requires careful navigation to avoid any perception or reality of improper influence. The core of the challenge lies in distinguishing legitimate business courtesies from actions that could be construed as bribery, which is strictly prohibited by Sumitomo Chemical's internal policies and relevant anti-corruption laws. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and application of Sumitomo Chemical's Code of Conduct and relevant anti-bribery regulations. This approach prioritizes transparency, due diligence, and adherence to established gift and hospitality policies. Specifically, it requires assessing the nature, value, and context of any proposed entertainment or gift to ensure it is a legitimate business practice and not an inducement or reward for preferential treatment. Documenting all interactions and seeking internal approval for any significant expenditure are crucial steps in demonstrating compliance and mitigating risk. This aligns with the principles of integrity and ethical conduct expected of all Sumitomo Chemical personnel and is fundamental to preventing violations of anti-bribery laws. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with lavish entertainment or expensive gifts without proper assessment or approval, assuming that such gestures are standard practice in the industry and will not be viewed negatively. This fails to acknowledge the strict regulatory environment and Sumitomo Chemical's zero-tolerance policy towards bribery. Such actions could be interpreted as an attempt to improperly influence the decision-making process, leading to severe legal and reputational consequences for both the individual and the company. Another incorrect approach is to decline all forms of business entertainment or gifts, even those that are clearly within acceptable limits and are customary for fostering business relationships. While this might seem overly cautious, it can hinder the development of necessary professional relationships and may be perceived as a lack of engagement or respect, potentially jeopardizing the business opportunity without a clear regulatory or ethical imperative. The key is proportionality and adherence to policy, not outright avoidance of all social interaction. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to delegate the decision-making regarding gifts and entertainment to junior staff without adequate training or oversight. This can lead to unintentional policy violations or misinterpretations of what constitutes acceptable conduct, increasing the risk of bribery or corruption. Responsibility for ethical conduct and compliance rests with all levels of the organization, and appropriate guidance and supervision are essential. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve 1. Identifying potential ethical or regulatory conflicts. 2. Consulting Sumitomo Chemical's Code of Conduct and relevant policies. 3. Assessing the nature, value, and intent of any proposed action. 4. Seeking guidance or approval from the appropriate internal compliance or legal department when in doubt. 5. Documenting all decisions and actions. Question 19. The analysis reveals that a Sumitomo chemical project team has identified a significant, previously unrecorded environmental liability stemming from historical waste disposal practices. This liability, if fully disclosed in the current financial reporting period, would negatively impact the company's reported earnings and potentially affect investor sentiment. The team is considering how to best address this finding in their upcoming disclosures. Option A. Omit the environmental liability from the current financial disclosures, with the intention of addressing it in future reporting once remediation plans are more concrete. Option B. Disclose the environmental liability but significantly downplay its potential financial impact, citing uncertainties in remediation costs. Option C. Proactively identify and disclose the full extent of the environmental liability in the current financial reporting period, along with a clear plan for remediation. Option D. Seek to delay the disclosure of the environmental liability until the next financial reporting cycle, arguing that further investigation is needed to quantify the exact costs. The correct answer is C. Proactively identify and disclose the full extent of the environmental liability in the current financial reporting period, along with a clear plan for remediation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Sumitomo chemical employee due to the inherent conflict between achieving business objectives and adhering to ethical and regulatory standards, particularly concerning environmental disclosures. The pressure to present a favorable financial outlook can tempt individuals to downplay or omit critical environmental liabilities, which could have significant legal, financial, and reputational consequences for Sumitomo Chemical. Careful judgment is required to balance business performance with corporate responsibility and transparency. The correct approach involves proactively identifying and disclosing all material environmental liabilities, regardless of their immediate impact on reported figures. This aligns with the principles of accurate financial reporting and corporate governance expected under relevant regulatory frameworks. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit and letter of regulations that mandate transparency in financial disclosures, ensuring that stakeholders have a complete and unvarnished view of the company's financial health and potential risks. This approach fosters trust, mitigates future legal and regulatory penalties, and upholds Sumitomo Chemical's commitment to responsible business practices. An incorrect approach that involves omitting or downplaying known environmental liabilities is ethically unsound and legally perilous. Such an action would constitute a misrepresentation of the company's financial position, potentially violating accounting standards and securities regulations that require full disclosure of material information. This failure to disclose can lead to severe penalties, including fines, sanctions, and reputational damage, undermining investor confidence and the long-term sustainability of Sumitomo Chemical. Another incorrect approach, which is to seek to delay the disclosure of environmental liabilities until a later reporting period, is also problematic. While it might temporarily improve current financial reporting, it still represents a form of non-disclosure of material information. This can be interpreted as an attempt to mislead stakeholders and can still result in regulatory scrutiny and penalties when the information eventually comes to light. It also fails to address the underlying risk and can exacerbate potential future problems. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a robust internal control environment. Employees should be encouraged to raise concerns without fear of reprisal. When faced with potential conflicts, professionals should consult with legal counsel, compliance officers, and senior management to ensure all decisions are compliant with applicable laws and ethical standards. A commitment to transparency and accuracy, even when it presents short-term challenges, is paramount for maintaining the integrity and long-term success of Sumitomo Chemical. Question 20. The evaluation methodology shows that a Sumitomo Chemical sales team is preparing a proposal for a significant new contract. They have discovered that a key competitor is about to launch a similar product with a potentially lower price point. The team is considering how to present this information to their client, aiming to secure the contract for Sumitomo Chemical. Which of the following approaches best reflects ethical and regulatory best practices for Sumitomo Chemical? Option A. Conduct a detailed, objective analysis of the competitor's product specifications and publicly available performance data, and present a factual comparison highlighting any potential limitations or areas where Sumitomo Chemical's product offers superior value, without making unsubstantiated claims or disparaging the competitor. Option B. Suggest to the client that certain technical details about the competitor's product are still under review and may be unfavorable, implying a need for caution without providing specific, verifiable information. Option C. Focus exclusively on the potential negative impact on Sumitomo Chemical's market share if the contract is lost, without critically evaluating the factual basis of the competitor's product claims or its actual market viability. Option D. Emphasize hypothetical or exaggerated potential safety concerns associated with the competitor's product, suggesting it may not meet stringent industry standards, even if definitive proof is lacking. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed, objective analysis of the competitor's product specifications and publicly available performance data, and present a factual comparison highlighting any potential limitations or areas where Sumitomo Chemical's product offers superior value, without making unsubstantiated claims or disparaging the competitor. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Sumitomo Chemical employee due to the inherent conflict between achieving business objectives and adhering to ethical and regulatory standards. The pressure to secure a new contract, coupled with the potential for a competitor's product to gain market share, can create an environment where shortcuts or misrepresentations might seem tempting. Careful judgment is required to navigate these pressures, while upholding Sumitomo Chemical's commitment to integrity and compliance. The correct approach involves a thorough and transparent review of the competitor's product information, focusing on factual accuracy and avoiding any unsubstantiated claims or disparagement. This aligns with principles of fair competition and accurate representation, which are fundamental to ethical business conduct and regulatory compliance in the chemical industry. Specifically, it respects the spirit of regulations that prohibit misleading advertising and unfair trade practices, ensuring that Sumitomo Chemical's competitive strategies are based on merit and factual information, not on deceptive tactics. An incorrect approach that involves exaggerating the potential risks of the competitor's product without concrete evidence would constitute a failure to adhere to principles of honesty and integrity. This could lead to regulatory scrutiny for misleading statements and damage Sumitomo Chemical's reputation. Another incorrect approach, which focuses solely on the potential negative impact on Sumitomo Chemical's market share without considering the accuracy of the competitor's claims, demonstrates a lack of objective analysis and a potential disregard for fair business practices. Finally, an approach that suggests withholding or selectively presenting information about the competitor's product to influence the client's decision would be a direct violation of ethical conduct and could have severe legal and reputational consequences. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes factual accuracy, ethical considerations, and regulatory compliance. This involves gathering objective data, assessing information impartially, and communicating findings transparently. When faced with competitive pressures, the focus should remain on highlighting the strengths of Sumitomo Chemical's own offerings and addressing client needs through legitimate and ethical means, rather than resorting to misrepresentation or disparagement of competitors.